See, this is how bad the green rhetoric is. This is my not so good camera. It doesn't make me look as beautiful. I was just wandering down here. It's like, if you had a magic wand, what are the messages to try and get through? But the problem with the green movement, in fact, the problem with anybody on the left, they've entirely, they are morons, meaning symbolism, finger up, clean fingernail. But symbolism really, really matters. A few symbolic small changes. If society makes an effort on one aspect of consumerism, then that is a symbol. If it's something that's genuinely causes quite although a small thing causes quite big change or apparent change in people's lives, then that becomes perhaps one domino that it's like, okay, symbolically I've taken on that green. Let's forget the word green. It's a disastrous word. Anti-consumerist or non-greedy. If they take on one aspect of really cutting back, then that may domino into other areas. But you see, here's a really good example of how terrible green rhetoric is. Terrible. I was wandering down there thinking, Jesus Christ, yeah. It's like 35 years ago, I had this little friend, just a friend, woman, girl, younger woman. We just really hit it on. We were friends. And we kept this wonderful kind of platonic distance, but she was wonderfully open. Anyway, I don't have friends normally with people who go to Oxford or anything like that. But she hadn't been to Oxford. She had been to Cheltenham Ladies. But she was cool. She was pretty cool. And she was wounded from her parents' social climbing, quite wealthy. But here's the point. And one of the things she was wounded about was, now, I went to stay in a house a few times over a few years. Here you go. Hugh Derbyshire. Now, Hugh Derbyshire was a middle-class lad who'd been to grammar school, I'm almost that, like a fairly kind of middle, just maybe slightly upper middle-class background. But he had made money. Yes, he was chairman of GEC many years ago. He'd become a Lloyd's name. Now that is the funniest thing in the world. Lloyd's had this club for the top rich people who were invited. You could only be invited to invest your money, give us 100 grand, and basically we kind of guarantee 20 or 30%. I think it was something like that. It was a ridiculously high level of return. They are guaranteed, they've always paid out this level of return. Anyway, Hugh Derbyshire was one of the very first of the names ever. He lost his shirt. But that's not, I shouldn't almost have put that in. The reason for putting that in is my friend was kind of wounded. He's like, oh, poor family, it's like my dad's doing really well, but he's lost, if you were a name, you could suddenly overnight be liable for 3 times what you'd invested. And he was bankrupted. But here's the point. So, nothing financial. That's the best example ever of, if you hear the government, if you hear the Labour Party saying, well, they can carry on forever servicing the debt. The names were told for probably more than 100 years that they would carry on getting this huge return on their investment, and overnight many thousands of them were made bankrupt. But here's the point. The point is this, is that when I met him, in fact he hadn't become bankrupt then, so he's a bloke living in a £1 million oldish, large house. He'd been chairman of GEC. He's a Lloyd's name. He was, a year or two later, made the High Sheriff of... It was Herefordshire, I think. Anyway, Hugh Derbyshire would go around with jumpers that had holes everywhere, and they really were tatty. He did a bit of work outdoors. He had a working orchard, but he wasn't. Most of his work was admin work, administering his small farm. But that's the thing. So a very wealthy man, top 1%, his normal dress, going around, even going out to the shops, was really worn through, and he wasn't an eccentric. This man had been chairman of GEC. You can look it up on the fucking internet. Okay? Yeah. Like, always great big holes that big in the corners of his jumper. And he actually, going there, I met her at the kind of, my little period of, for a few years, like, maybe I need to be a little bit of a yuppie. And I went once to the rice shop in the King's Road and bought 10 shirts. I've still got a couple of them, thank God, but I never wore them. So I got home, what am I doing? Why am I, this isn't me. Anyway, yeah, so meeting Hugh, by the late 90s, late 80s, yeah, 1990-ish, we'd been so brainwashed. You've got to, even me, you've got to be you've got to have a bit of a wardrobe. Unless you're walking the coastal path, almost everybody's got new special clothing. We were starting to be brainwashed then. This is it. You've got to not be gauche, not be vulgar, but yes, you need to have some reasonable choice of clothing that should be reasonable quality. And you meet Hugh. I met Hugh. It's like, I felt, God, I've become, I've probably got 10 shirts at home and 10 jumpers by now. Half of them second-hand, but it's like, no, I've become greedy. I'm wasting the planet's resources. Here's a man who's chairman of GEC, or only ended that career position a year or two later. And, okay, yes, he's going to have a few suits in his wardrobe which are top quality wool for going to the top business meetings or going to Lloyd's. Please, don't make me bankrupt. You lying cunts. You said it was going to last forever, the 20%. Well, literally, it was hilarious. I felt for the man. I felt for his daughter, because she hadn't been taught, she hadn't read enough of good books. Yeah. She didn't realise nothing lasts forever. I really felt for his daughter. It really, really badly affected her, actually. Oh, poor little rich girl. No, she was very humble and actually a prick. In fact, that's why we became friends. But keep it to the point. Yeah. So, I'm thinking, it's awful to preach, well, don't buy loads of new clothing. But then I'm thinking to myself, hang on. One of the richest men, in the top 10 of rich men I've hung out with, for one reason or other, my work was sometimes that I had to, he will have probably only owned 3 jumpers and 4 or 5 non-dress shirts and 3 or 4 pairs of trousers. That was the norm for in fact, that would have been slightly more than the norm for the top rich men. Excuse me, we've become so fucking, it's just all gone berserk. And okay, there can be we can always send it in cargo boats to Africans, that which doesn't get used. Excuse me, that's another waste of resources. Blah, blah, blah. It's much more efficient in terms of resources to send them a solar farm instead. There we go. See, but that's what political correctness actually has forced even me into. Why am I thinking it's bad to be constantly buying new clothing? Why am I thinking that? I'm a terrible person. I really am. Caroline Lucas should have I bet even they've got an execution squad. She should have me executed, but no. It didn't used to be that everybody had to have, 70 million people in this country, and I'm sure that if you take, that's a hell of a lot of extra resources, because the average middle-aged or 20-something now, I should imagine, will have 70 or 80 items of non-underwear clothing, when even Hugh Derbyshire probably only has 10 items of non-underwear clothing and a couple of dress suits that are reasonably well made, so of course are going to last for 20 years, as long as it doesn't get, there you go. I'm not a fucking misanthropist. I'm the exact opposite, especially when the amount of time it takes to keep buying everything new and all of this. It's just... Right, that's it. That'll do. That's the end. I'm so glad I remembered that.